Frank Miller stood before the Galactic Council chambers with a tight smile frozen on his face. Sweat formed on his brow as the Zorn representative spoke. The large, blue-skinned alien's voice boomed through the circular hall. After careful study, this council has determined that Earth is now classified as a tamed world, said Councillor Vex. Humans have become too peaceful, too docile after centuries without major conflict. They no longer qualify for emergent species status. Frank's hands tightened into fists behind his back, but his face showed nothing. As Earth's ambassador, he knew what this meant. The classification would limit human expansion into space. It would restrict their military growth. It would block them from developing certain technologies. All because the Council had decided humans were no longer wild enough to be a threat or worthy of full rights. "We accept the Council's wisdom," Frank said, the words like ashes in his mouth. "Earth thanks you for your consideration." 3 hours later, inside the Earth delegation's private chambers, the masks came off. Those arrogant space lizards. Laura Bennett slammed her fist on the table. As Admiral of Earth's Defense Fleet, she wasn't used to accepting defeat. They'd been planning this for years. The trade restrictions, the technology embargoes, all leading to this. Frank loosened his formal collar. "We knew this might happen. The Zorn have wanted our resource-rich solar system since first contact. Declaring us tamed gives them the legal opening they need." "So what do we do now?" asked Greg Wilson, the youngest member of the delegation. "File an appeal." Laura laughed without humor. "Appeals take decades. By then, they'll have already started mining operations in our outer systems." Frank stared out the window at the shimmering space station that housed the Galactic Council. Stars glittered beyond, reminding him of everything humanity stood to lose. "We need to show them we're not tamed," he said quietly, "but not through violence. That would only prove their point about us being dangerous." Laura's eyes lit up. "I have an idea." She activated her tablet and made a call. "Get me Dr. Peter Hayes from the North American Rewilding Project." Immediately. 26 hours later, Dr. Hayes walked into Earth's embassy on the station. Tall with graying hair, he looked confused about why a conservation scientist had been urgently transported across the solar system. Laura showed him the Council's decision. "They think humans are domesticated, Peter. Too peaceful to deserve equal standing." Peter's eyes narrowed as he read. "That's ridiculous. Our history is exactly the problem." Frank interrupted. "We've had peace for too long. The Council sees that as weakness, not strength." Laura leaned forward. "Tell them about Project Genesis, Peter." Peter looked surprised. "My wolf restoration program. What does that have to do with galactic politics?" "Everything," Laura said with a smile. "How successful has the rewilding been?" "Beyond our hopes," Peter said, professional pride warming his voice. "The gray wolf population is thriving across North America. Their intelligence and social structures are even more complex than we originally thought. Some packs have even developed new hunting techniques we've never seen in historical records." Frank looked confused. "Admiral, how does this help our situation?" Laura's smile grew wider. "The Council thinks humans are tamed, domesticated. But they forget something important about Earth's history." "What's that?" Greg asked. "We didn't rise alone," Laura said. "Thousands of years ago, early humans formed a partnership with wolves. We hunted together, survived together. They weren't our pets. They were our partners." Peter's eyes widened as he understood. "You want to show the Council that humanity still has wild allies." Laura nodded. "Exactly. If humans are judged too tamed, perhaps it's time to introduce the Council to some representatives who definitely aren't." Frank stared at her. "You want to send wolves as diplomatic envoys?" "Not just any wolves," Laura said. "The best, the brightest, enhanced with our latest communication technology. Let's remind the galaxy that Earth still has teeth." The room fell silent as they considered the audacious plan. "It's crazy," Frank finally said. Then he smiled. So crazy it just might work. The North American Rewilding Preserve stretched across what was once called Wyoming. Green forests and wide plains rolled out under the morning sun. Dr. Peter Hayes stood at the edge of a high ridge, watching a wolf pack move through the valley below. Samantha Wright joined him, her eyes following the wolves. As the leading animal behaviorist on the project, she knew each wolf by sight. "Have you decided which ones?" she asked. Peter nodded. 5 of them. We need wolves with the right mix of intelligence, adaptability, and comfort around humans. Samantha pointed to a silver-gray female leading the pack. Luna has to be one of them. She's the smartest wolf I've ever studied. Already on the list, Peter agreed, along with Shadow, Ranger, Storm, and Nova. A military truck pulled up behind them. Captain John Douglas stepped out, his uniform crisp despite the long drive. His face was serious, with lines that showed years of service in the Earth Defense Force. "So these are the ambassadors who will save our planet's status?" John asked, not hiding his doubt. "They're just animals." Peter smiled. "Wolves are far more than just animals, Captain. They're complex social beings with problem-solving abilities that rival some primates, and they chose to walk alongside humans thousands of years ago, when both species realized they were stronger together." John looked unconvinced. "Admiral Bennett briefed me on the enhancements you're planning." Neural interfaces, genetic modifications, sounds like science fiction. "It's all tested technology," Samantha said. "The neural interfaces will translate their thoughts into simple language patterns. The genetic modifications will only enhance what's already there: better memory, stronger pattern recognition." John shook his head. "I'm a diplomat and soldier, not a zookeeper. How am I supposed to handle 5 apex predators in a space station filled with aliens?" Peter laughed. "You don't handle wolves, Captain. You work with them." Later that day, John entered the observation area where Luna had been brought. He expected to see a wild animal pacing or snarling behind glass. Instead, the silver wolf sat calmly, watching the door as if expecting him. "She's been waiting for you," Samantha said quietly. "We told her someone new was coming." "You told her?" John asked, eyebrow raised. "Wolves understand more than you think," Peter explained. "And Luna understands more than most wolves." John stepped closer to the glass. The wolf's yellow eyes tracked him, not with fear or aggression, but with clear intelligence. She tilted her head, studying him. "Can I go in?" John asked suddenly, surprising himself. Peter and Samantha exchanged glances. "Are you sure?" Peter asked. John nodded. Something about the wolf's gaze had reached him. They opened the door, and John stepped inside slowly. Luna stood, her powerful body tense but not threatening. John remained still, remembering his training about predators. To everyone's surprise, Luna approached with measured steps. She stopped 3 feet from John, looking directly into his eyes in a way wild wolves almost never did with strangers. Then she sat, still maintaining eye contact. "She's evaluating me," John whispered. Samantha smiled. "Yes, she's deciding if you're worthy of her trust." Something shifted in John at that moment. The wolf wasn't submitting to him as a pet would. She was deciding if he was an acceptable partner. Meanwhile, across the station in their private chambers, the Zorn ambassador Kraz spoke quietly with his aides. The humans accepted their designation without protest, he said, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "The council believes they've grown soft. Their military is still considerable," said an aide, "but restricted now that they're classified as tamed." Kraz replied, "In 50 cycles, we'll have mining rights to their outer planets. In 100, perhaps more. What if they resist?" Kraz laughed, a harsh sound. "What can they do? File complaints, stage protests. They've forgotten their predator instincts. That's why they're being left behind." How wrong he was. 6 months passed quickly. In a special facility built at the edge of the Rewilding Preserve, the wolf pack trained daily with their human team. The room buzzed with activity as Dr. Olivia Martinez adjusted the neural interface on Luna's head. The device was thin and light, wrapping around the wolf's skull without restricting movement. "How's that feel, girl?" Olivia asked. A series of lights blinked on her tablet, translating Luna's brain patterns. The words appeared on screen. "Comfortable. Ready for work." Olivia smiled and patted Luna's shoulder. "Good. Today we're practicing diplomatic scenarios again." Across the room, Shadow worked with John Douglas. The Black Wolf had formed a special bond with the captain over the months. At first, John had been stiff and formal with the wolves. Now he moved with them like a member of the pack. "The Aldarians are prey species," John explained to Shadow as they walked. "They'll be nervous around you. We need to show them you're not a threat." Shadow's neural interface translated. "No sudden movements. Keep head low. Do not show teeth." John nodded. "Exactly. But don't act submissive either. You're a representative of Earth, not a pet." Ranger, Storm, and Nova worked with Samantha Wright in another corner. They were practicing group formations, moving together in patterns that would show unity while maintaining awareness of their surroundings. "The Galactic Council chambers will be crowded," Samantha reminded them. "Many unfamiliar species with strange smells. You need to stay focused on the mission." The wolves' interfaces showed their understanding. They had come a long way from wild predators. The genetic enhancements had improved their already impressive intelligence, while the neural interfaces allowed basic communication. But most impressive was their natural ability to work as a team, a trait wolves had evolved over millions of years. Peter Hayes watched from the observation deck above. Admiral Bennett stood beside him. "Will they be ready in time?" she asked. The council meeting was just weeks away. "They're exceeding all expectations," Peter said. "Their ability to learn is remarkable. The neural interfaces are working better than we hoped." "And the control protocols?" Bennett asked. "What happens if they encounter a threat?" Peter frowned. "They're not robots, Laura. We can't control them. We've established trust and partnership. That's more reliable than any control system." A warning light flashed, followed by a harsh buzzing. Down below, the training room filled with a strange smell. The emergency system had malfunctioned, releasing the scent markers used to simulate threat scenarios. "Override it," Peter shouted, rushing for the controls. But before anyone could act, the wolves responded. Instead of panicking or growing aggressive, they moved with purpose. Luna took point position. Shadow and Ranger flanked the humans. Storm and Nova took rear guard positions. They formed a perfect protective formation around their human teammates. Luna's interface showed: "Exit south door. Safe path. Stay together." The humans followed the wolves' lead, moving calmly through the facility until they reached the safe area. The emergency was minor, quickly contained, but its impact was major. Later, in the briefing room, John sat with Luna beside him. "That wasn't part of the training program," he said. "You created that evacuation pattern yourselves." Luna's interface blinked. "Pack protects. We are pack now." The room fell silent. Admiral Bennett finally spoke. "I think they're ready." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the Zorn delegate Kraz received a curious message. Earth was sending a delegation to appeal their tamed world status. More interesting was the request for special accommodation for additional Earth representatives with unusual atmospheric and space requirements. What are they planning? Kraz wondered. He dismissed his concerns. What could a tamed species possibly do to surprise the galaxy? He would soon find out. Centauri Station hung in space like a shining wheel. Hundreds of ships from across the galaxy docked at its many ports. The Earth vessel Northern Star approached slowly, requesting permission to dock. Inside the ship, Frank Miller adjusted his formal uniform. As Earth's ambassador, he would speak first. But today, he wasn't the most important part of the delegation. "How are they doing?" he asked John. Captain Douglas checked his tablet. "Calm. Focused. Luna is keeping the others settled. The 5 wolves rested in their private chamber. Each wore their neural interface, now smaller and more elegant than the training versions. Special suits protected them from the station's atmosphere while allowing freedom of movement. They looked powerful and dignified. "Remember," Frank said, "we're presenting them as Earth's first partners. Not as pets, not as curiosities. As representatives with equal standing to humans." John nodded. "They understand. Better than some of our human delegates, I think." The ship docked with a gentle bump. It was time. The Galactic Council chamber was a massive room with rising tiers of seats. Hundreds of species from across the galaxy watched as the Earth delegation entered. Ambassador Frank Miller walked first, followed by Admiral Bennett and the human team. Then came the wolves. Luna led, her silver coat gleaming under the lights. Shadow and Ranger flanked her, with Storm and Nova following. They moved with grace and purpose, heads high and alert. The chamber erupted in murmurs and gasps. Counselor Vex of the Zorn rose from his seat. "What is the meaning of this? Animals are not permitted in council chambers." Frank stepped forward. "These are not mere animals, Counselor. They are Earth's first partners, the species who chose to walk alongside humans thousands of years ago. They are sovereign representatives of planet Earth, with equal standing to myself." The chamber exploded with noise. Some delegates looked curious, others outraged. The Zorn delegation seemed particularly disturbed. "This is an outrage," Vex shouted. "A mockery of council protocols." The head of the council, an ancient Eldari named Soren, raised a hand for silence. "Ambassador Miller, please explain this unusual approach." Frank smiled. "When the council classified Earth as a tamed world, you judged only one species from our planet. We felt this was incomplete. Our world evolved many intelligent species. Wolves were never tamed by humans. They chose partnership. They represent Earth's untamed spirit, which still thrives despite our peaceful civilization." As if understanding his words, Luna stepped forward. Her neural interface activated, projecting her thoughts onto the main council screen. "We speak for Earth. We are not tamed. We are allies." The chamber fell silent in shock. During the reception that followed, many delegates approached the wolves with caution and curiosity. A Zorn aide named Vex moved toward Luna with a scanning device. The wolf neither cowered nor attacked. She simply stood her ground, watching him with steady yellow eyes. When he stepped too close, she showed her teeth briefly, a clear boundary, not a threat. Vex stepped back immediately. Across the room, Storm suddenly grew alert. The dark gray wolf moved to Samantha Wright's side, gently guiding her away from the refreshment table. His interface blinked. "Food wrong. Bad smell." Samantha discreetly collected a sample of the food. Later analysis would confirm it contained compounds toxic to humans, placed there deliberately. By the end of the day, news had spread throughout the station. Earth had brought wolves as representatives. Wolves who could communicate. Wolves who had detected an assassination attempt. The Eldarian representative, a gentle herbivore species, approached John with nervous respect. "Your wolf partners are most impressive. We had no idea Earth maintained such primal connections." John smiled. "We found there's strength in partnership between different kinds of intelligence." In their private chamber, Kraz raged at his aides. How did they train mere beasts to act this way? "This changes everything." His chief scientist looked troubled. "Sir, the neural patterns we detected, these aren't trained animals. They're thinking, reasoning beings. Earth hasn't tamed their wolves. They've elevated them." Kraz's eyes narrowed. "Then we must find a way to prove these creatures are too dangerous to be representatives. The Council fears predator species. We can use that." But as he plotted, he failed to notice the small listening device Storm had planted on one of his aides during a seemingly accidental collision in the hallway. Back in the Earth delegation's quarters, The wolves and humans heard every word. The next morning, the Earth delegation gathered in their quarters. Frank Miller looked worried as he addressed the team. "The Zorn have invoked the challenge of capability," he said. "It's an ancient council protocol. Any newly recognized species must prove themselves worthy through 3 trials." "Let me guess," John said. "They're demanding our wolves take these trials." Frank nodded. "Exactly. The trials test intelligence, restraint, and courage. Normally, it's just a formality for new technological species. But the Zorn are insisting the wolves themselves must pass to be considered legitimate representatives." Luna's neural interface lit up. "We will take their challenge." The other wolves' interfaces showed agreement. Their confidence surprised even their human partners. "The first trial is tomorrow," Frank continued. "Intelligence. They've designed a maze with logic puzzles." Samantha smiled. "Wolves are natural problem solvers. This might not go how the Zorn expect." The next day, council members filled the observation deck above a large chamber. Below, a complex maze had been constructed with multiple paths and obstacles. The 5 wolves entered together. They paused, surveying the challenge before them. Then, instead of rushing forward, they spread out, each taking a different section. Nova, the youngest wolf with remarkable spatial memory, moved quickly through the pathways, mentally mapping the layout. Ranger encountered the first puzzle, a series of symbols that needed to be pressed in sequence to open a barrier. The wolf studied the patterns, then pressed his paw deliberately against the correct symbols. The barrier slid open. Across the maze, the other wolves were solving similar challenges. "They're working as a pack," Peter explained to the watching council members, sharing information through subtle signals, dividing the task efficiently. The Zorn delegates looked increasingly disturbed as the wolves completed the maze in record time. The second trial came the next day. Restraint. The wolves were placed in a chamber filled with stimuli designed to trigger predatory responses: moving targets, prey scents, loud noises, and flashing lights. The wolves remained calm, ignoring the provocations. Halfway through the test, a hidden mechanism suddenly activated, sending a sharp object into Shadow's side. The black wolf yelped in pain. The Zorn leaned forward eagerly, expecting the other wolves to fly into a rage at their packmate's injury. Instead, the wolves formed a protective circle around Shadow. Luna used her neural interface to signal for medical assistance. "Remarkable restraint," murmured the Eldari counselor, "even when provoked with actual harm." The Zorn representative scowled. The final trial was courage. The wolves faced a simulated natural disaster: rising water, falling debris, and unstable pathways. Their task: rescue holographic representations of council members trapped in the chamber. The wolves moved with purpose, finding safe routes through the chaos. Storm used his strength to hold back a falling beam while Nova guided a holographic Aldarian to safety. Ranger and Shadow worked together to create a bridge across rising water for a group of smaller alien representations. Luna found a Zorn delegate trapped under debris. The hologram was programmed to snarl and threaten her, but she calmly helped anyway, pushing aside the heavy material pinning him down. "The most interesting part," Peter told the watching council, "is that we didn't train them for these specific scenarios. They're applying problem-solving and teamwork to new situations." When the trials were complete, the council gathered to evaluate the results. The Zorn tried to argue that the wolves had been specially programmed or were being controlled remotely. "That's why you insisted on the neural interfaces being removed for the trials," Frank pointed out. "They succeeded using only their natural abilities and intelligence." The Eldari counselor, Soren, nodded slowly. "I am impressed. In my long life, I have never seen non-technological beings display such reasoning and cooperation." The Aldarian representative spoke up. "I move to recognize these wolves as legitimate representatives of Earth with full diplomatic standing." The Zorn objected loudly, but they were outvoted. Later, Luna rested in their quarters, her side against John's leg. Her interface translated her thoughts. They underestimated us. All of us. John patted her head. That's been humanity's advantage for our entire history, being underestimated. What neither of them knew was that Dr. Peter Hayes had made a shocking discovery in the station's genetic archives, one that would change everything they understood about the Zorn. Dr. Peter Hayes stared at his screen in the small research lab he had been given access to on Centauri Station. His hands trembled slightly as he scrolled through the genetic records. What he had found seemed impossible, yet the evidence was clear. "Peter, you missed the celebration dinner," Laura Bennett said as she entered the lab. "The wolves were amazing today. Even some of the most skeptical council members are starting to." She stopped when she saw his face. "What's wrong?" "I found something in the station's genetic archives," Peter said quietly. "Something about the Zorn." He turned the screen toward her. "Look at their genetic structure from 3,000 years ago, compared to now." Laura studied the complex diagrams, her military training including enough biological knowledge to understand the basics. "They've changed. Significantly. They modified themselves," Peter explained. "The Zorn were once apex predators themselves. Look at these markers for aggression, predatory instincts, territorial behavior. They're still there in the base code, but suppressed through extensive genetic modification. Why would they do that?" "To appear more civilized to the rest of the galaxy," Peter said. "Their history indicates they were feared by other species. Rather than find balance, they chose to alter their fundamental nature." Laura's eyes widened. "So their aggression wasn't eliminated, just channeled elsewhere. Into political and economic domination," Peter finished. "They fear us because Earth did something unique in galactic history." "What's that?" "We're the only known planet where predator and prey species evolved into cooperation rather than one dominating the other. Humans and wolves, working together thousands of years ago, represented an evolutionary path the Zorn rejected." Meanwhile, John Douglas and Luna walked through a quiet section of the station. After the trials, they had been given more freedom to move around. Luna's neural interface was active, allowing her to communicate with John as they explored. Many species here, different smells, different fears. Luna's thoughts appeared on John's small screen. "Yes," John agreed. "Most have never been close to a predator species before. That's why some are afraid of you." They turned a corner and nearly bumped into a Zorn. This one was different from the others they had met. Smaller, with less ornate clothing. "Oh," the Zorn said, stepping back. "The Earth Wolf. I'm Dr. Merrick. I've been hoping to speak with you." John tensed. "Why?" "I'm not like the other Zorn you've met," Merrick said quickly. "I left our central government years ago. I've been studying comparative xenobiology." Luna's interface blinked. "He smells different, not threatening. Curious." John relaxed slightly. "What do you want to talk about?" Merrick looked around nervously. "Not here. Please, follow me." They went to a small observation room overlooking the stars. Merrick sealed the door. "What I'm about to tell you could get me executed by my government," he said. "The Zorn fear humanity for reasons beyond what you know." He activated a small device that projected genetic images similar to what Peter had discovered. "The Zorn were once like your wolves, apex predators. But we chose a different path than Earth. When we reached the stars, other species feared us. Rather than find balance, we removed parts of ourselves. You modified your genetics," John said, remembering his briefing about many species' genetic engineering. "Yes, but at great cost. We lost something essential. We channeled our predatory nature into conquest by other means, political, economic. When we discovered Earth, we found something that terrified our leaders." "What?" "You had done what we couldn't. Humans and wolves, predators both, had found partnership without losing your essential nature. Your path proved our greatest fears, that we mutilated ourselves unnecessarily." Luna's interface showed her understanding. "They fear what they lost." "Exactly," Merrick said, looking at the wolf with wonder. Your wolves represent what the Zorn could have been. Predators with restraint, strength with wisdom. Back in the Earth quarters, Peter shared his discovery with Frank and the team. The ambassador looked troubled. This explains their determination to classify Earth as tamed. They don't fear our aggression. They fear our balance. Samantha nodded. We should share this with the friendly council members. They need to understand what's really happening. Frank agreed. Carefully, though. We need allies, not more enemies. The Eldari representative, when discreetly shown the evidence, sighed deeply. We suspected something like this. My species once had partners similar to your wolves, before we civilized ourselves. We have regretted the loss for thousands of years. The main council chamber buzzed with tension. Earth's wolf representatives had passed the trials, earning grudging respect from many species. Now Ambassador Frank Miller stood ready to present evidence of the Zorn's plot to have Earth classified as a resource world that could be harvested. The wolves sat in a row behind him, dignified and alert. Luna's silver coat gleamed under the bright lights. Shadow and Ranger flanked her, with Storm and Nova at the ends. Their neural interfaces were active, allowing them to follow the complex discussions. Members of the council, Frank began. Earth requests that our classification be reconsidered based on new evidence. The Zorn delegation shifted uncomfortably. Councillor Vex glared at the human ambassador. Frank continued, We have discovered that our classification as a tamed world was not based on fair assessment, but was part of a long-term strategy by the Zornto. A high-pitched sound suddenly filled the chamber. The sound was so painful that many delegates covered their ears or hearing organs. The humans winced in pain. The wolves, with their sensitive hearing, suffered most. They whined and pawed at their heads. The Zorn delegates watched with satisfaction. See how these beasts react under pressure. Vex shouted over the noise. They are reverting to their wild nature. But the wolves did not attack or flee. Though clearly in pain, Luna stood firm. The other wolves followed her lead, forming a protective circle around the human delegates. Their neural interfaces flickered as they fought to maintain control. John realized what was happening. It's a sonic weapon. They're trying to drive the wolves into a frenzy. Frank shouted over the noise. This is an outrage. The Zorn are using weapons in the council chamber. Soren, the Eldari counselor, ordered the security systems to locate and disable the sonic device. The terrible sound stopped as suddenly as it had begun. In the silence that followed, Luna's neural interface activated. Her message appeared on the main screen for all to see. We are not controlled by fear or pain. We choose restraint. We choose partnership. The chamber erupted in commotion. Many species were impressed by the wolves' discipline. Others were outraged at the Zorn's tactics. This proves nothing. Vex snarled. These are still dangerous predators that have no place in civilized. He was interrupted by shouting from the chamber entrance. A group of Zorn in military uniforms burst in, weapons drawn. Death to the Earth Alliance. Their leader shouted. Chaos erupted. Delegates scattered, seeking cover. The Earth security team moved to protect their diplomats, but they were outnumbered. The wolves reacted instantly. Luna and Shadow raced toward the attackers, not to attack, but to distract them from the vulnerable delegates. Ranger guided a group of smaller alien species toward an exit. Storm used his powerful body to shield several diplomats from weapons fire. Nova, the youngest wolf, spotted a small Meridian child separated from its parent in the chaos. The wolf raced across the chamber as a Zorn extremist aimed at the child. Nova leaped, taking the shot meant for the young alien. The wolf fell, wounded badly. The station's security forces arrived, quickly overwhelming the attackers. The Zorn extremists were captured. Medical teams rushed in to help the injured. John knelt beside Nova, tears in his eyes as he pressed his hand to the wolf's bleeding side. Stay with us, girl. Help is coming. The Meridian child's parent approached, their tentacles gently touching Nova's fur. Your wolf saved my child. Why would she risk herself for a different species? John looked up, his voice thick with emotion. Because that's what partners do. They protect not just their own, but anyone who needs protection. The medical team arrived with a stretcher for Nova. As they carried her away, other council members gathered around, watching with new understanding in their eyes. In the aftermath, evidence was discovered linking the attack directly to Councillor Vex and the Zorn government. Frank presented the full documentation of their long-term plot against Earth, including their plans for resource extraction once humans were sufficiently restricted. The Eldari Councillor Soren addressed the shaken assembly. Today we have witnessed both the worst and the best of what sentient beings can be. The Zorn sought to prove that predator species cannot be trusted in civilization. Instead, they have proven exactly the opposite. 3 days after the attack, the Galactic Council gathered for an emergency session. The chamber had been repaired, but memories of the violence remained fresh. Security was tight. The Zorn delegation was notably absent, their speaking privileges revoked pending a full investigation. Earth's ambassador Frank Miller took his place at the speaking platform. Behind him sat the 4 wolves: Luna, Shadow, Ranger, and Storm. The 5th spot remained empty, a silent reminder of Nova's sacrifice. Members of the council, Frank began, the events of recent days have revealed much about the true nature of species, not through words, but through actions. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Many delegates glanced respectfully at the wolves. Earth requests that our classification be reconsidered, not just returned to emergent species status, but recognized for what we truly are. A world where different intelligent species have chosen cooperation over domination. The head of the council, Soren of the Eldari, stood. The council has reviewed all evidence. We have witnessed the behavior of Earth's wolf representatives under extreme conditions. We have confirmed the Zorn conspiracy to manipulate Earth's status for resource exploitation. The chamber fell silent as Soren continued. It is the decision of this council to revoke Earth's tamed world classification immediately. Furthermore, we grant Earth a new, unprecedented designation: Balanced Evolution World. Cheers and applause filled the chamber. Frank looked back at his team with a smile of relief and pride. Soren raised his hand for quiet. This new classification recognizes the unique evolutionary path humanity and Earth's other species have taken. It grants full rights of expansion, technology development, and self-defense, plus the right to share Earth's partnership model with other willing species. After the session, many delegates approached the wolves with new respect. The Eldarian representative bowed low before Luna. My species once had partners similar to your relationship with humans, the Eldarian said. We had forgotten the strength that comes from such bonds. Several of our worlds have requested permission to send representatives to Earth to learn about your rewilding program. In the medical bay, John sat beside Nova's recovery pod. The young wolf was healing, though slowly. Her sacrifice had touched many hearts throughout the station. Alien medical experts had offered their assistance, bringing treatments unknown to Earth medicine. The door slid open. The small Meridian child Nova had saved entered with its parent. The child placed a handmade drawing on Nova's pod, a simple picture of a wolf and a Meridian holding hands. She helped someone who was not her kind, the parent said. This is rare wisdom in our galaxy. Later that evening, the Earth team gathered in their quarters to celebrate. The neural interfaces allowed the wolves to join the conversation fully. What happens now? Samantha asked. Several council species have requested diplomatic teams like ours, Frank said. Wolf-human partnerships representing Earth's interests throughout the galaxy. Luna's interface displayed. We will need more wolves. More humans willing to learn our ways. Peter nodded. The rewilding program will expand. This is just the beginning. 2 days later, the Northern Star prepared for its journey home. From the ship's main viewport, John and Luna watched as Centauri Station grew smaller against the stars. The wolf's neural interface was active, sharing her thoughts. They thought we were tamed, Luna's message read, "They didn't understand." "Understand what?" John asked. "That we were never tamed. We chose partnership. There is strength in choosing allies rather than subjects." John placed his hand on the wolf's head. "That's the message we brought to the stars. That's what scared the Zorn so much." As news of Earth's new status spread across human colonies, the story of the wolf Envoys became legend. Training began for new human-wolf diplomatic teams. Applications flooded in from people wanting to work with the rewilding program. Humanity's place among the stars was secured not by conquest or submission, but by the ancient bond between two species who chose to walk together into an uncertain future. As they had done for thousands of years on Earth, they would now do among the stars, partners in the true sense of the word. When the northern star reached Earth, Nova walked down the ramp on her own 4 legs, her injury healed but leaving a scar she would carry with honor. Behind her came the other wolves and their human teammates, bringing home a new understanding of their place in the galaxy and the promise of adventures yet to come.